Today, Angelina Jolie continues to use a platform not for attention, but for awareness. Her work with refugees, survivors of war, and women's rights organizations remains a central focus of her life. But for those who pay close attention, her inner transformation is equally powerful. She attends interfaith conferences. She's been seen entering mosques not as a spectacle, but as a seeker. In Istanbul, she visited the Blue Mosque not just for its architecture, but to pray. In Jordan, she spent time with female scholars discussing the role of women in Islam. A close friend of Jolie's, a Middle Eastern human rights worker, shared anonymously, she's found something in Islam that speaks to her soul. The discipline, the mercy, the focus on community and charity. But more than anything, the idea of surrender. She's always carried a lot of weight. Faith has helped her put some of it down. She now actively supports causes that align with Islamic principles, not in name, but in action. Her foundation has funded clean water projects during Ramadan. She supported education for girls in regions where Islam is often misrepresented. And she's worked to dispel stereotypes, stating, "The people I've met in the Muslim world are among the kindest, most dignified humans I've ever known." Does that mean she has become Muslim? The public may never get a definitive answer. And maybe that's the point. Angelina's journey is not about conversion, but conviction. Not about labels, but learning. Not about performance, but peace. Her story challenges us all, not just to rethink who she is, but to re-examine our own paths. In a world shouting for attention, Hayes is a whisper of grace, humility, and quiet faith. And in that silence, there is something truly divine. The private embrace of a deeper spiritual path. By the time Jolie entered her late 40s, her life had already undergone major transformations. She had undergone preventive surgeries due to her family's cancer history. Her marriage to Brad Pitt, once thought to be a fairy tale, had ended, and she was now the mother of 6 children, 3 biological, 3 adopted, from different parts of the world, including Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. But one thing remained constant, her spiritual curiosity. Sources close to the actress began noticing subtle shifts. She started observing certain customs, not out of obligation, but out of respect and personal conviction. She began fasting during Ramadan, not every day, but as a form of mindfulness. Her wardrobe changed subtly, less revealing, more conscious. Her children, especially Maddox and Zahara, played a role too. In various interviews, Jolie emphasized raising her children to understand and respect their roots. For Zahara, born in Ethiopia, a country with a rich blend of Orthodox Christianity and Islam, faith was part of her identity. Jolie made sure that identity wasn't lost. She hired tutors, visited cultural centers, and engaged in religious studies not as an outsider looking in, but as a learner. Those around her noticed she stopped drinking alcohol completely. She would step away during shoots or meetings to pray or reflect. On a humanitarian trip to a Muslim-majority region, she was overheard saying, "I find peace in surrender. It helps me stay centered." These weren't headlines. These weren't social media moments. These were personal, intentional shifts that signaled a private journey. In interviews, Jolie began to use phrases like Insha'Allah and Alhamdulillah, softly, naturally. For many fans, it was a surprise. For those who had followed her humanitarian path closely, it was simply a continuation of who she had always been becoming. Still, she didn't make any grand declarations. She didn't announce any conversions or adopt religious labels. When asked, she responded with quiet grace, "Faith is personal. I'm still learning every day." In an age where celebrity conversions often trend for clicks, Angelina chose silence. A spiritual path walked not with press releases, but with prayer beads. Angelina Jolie, a name that echoes through the halls of Hollywood, humanitarian forums, and global cinema. For years, she's been known not just for her iconic performances in films like Girl, Interrupted, Maleficent, and Tomb Raider, but also for her tireless humanitarian work across conflict zones and refugee camps. But behind the flashing cameras and red carpet appearances, a quieter, deeper transformation was slowly taking place, one that would eventually shift the lens through which the world viewed her. This is not just a story about faith. It's a story about identity, about pain, healing, and the search for something greater. A story about a woman who had it all by society's standards, yet still felt an emptiness that neither awards nor applause could fill. In her early years, Jolie was often seen as rebellious, mysterious, and fiercely independent. Her public persona fascinated the media. Tattoos, dark fashion choices, and high-profile relationships kept her constantly in the spotlight. Yet, those closest to her whispered of a deeper side, one filled with questions, spiritual ones. During her missions as a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador and later Special Envoy, Jolie spent significant time in Muslim-majority countries, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Jordan, and Syria. But these weren't red carpet visits. These were raw, real encounters with people who had lost everything yet still held onto something invisible, faith. Jolie would sit for hours listening to refugee women speak about loss, resilience, and most strikingly, surrender to God. She was intrigued, not by the political narrative that the Western world often painted, but by the personal faith she saw in those living through unimaginable hardships. She once reportedly said, "There is something deeply humbling about people who have nothing but still speak of peace, forgiveness, and God's mercy." It wasn't a conversion. It wasn't a moment of lightning strike change. It was a seed planted. Over time, she began reading more. Not just political histories or humanitarian briefings, but spiritual texts. The Quran was among them. Friends and aid workers she trusted recommended it not as propaganda, but as a way to understand the people she was trying to help. And understand, she did,